Okay, good morning everyone. So today we have a little delayed class. Yeah. I hope you don't have any doubts from yesterday's class. Okay. And am I audible enough? Yeah, is it audible? Right. So you have any doubts from yesterday's class? If you have, kindly let us take up. Today we'll be taking doubts first, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever doubts you have. And then we'll start with our the one unit that was left in paper 1, techniques. Very briefly I'll tell you. We discussed also yesterday a part of it. And so today we'll be talking about paper 2. Okay. And how to study paper 2, that is a very important aspect. Most of the students, they are threatened by paper 2 and the content that is to be written, right? But it is not something very complicated. Right, so you have any doubts, kindly? Tell me. Anything from yesterday's class? Anything that you have been reading? Anything that you are referring to? You have any doubts from those sources or references or any notes, whatever you are doing? Kindly tell me. No doubt. Because you will be given a homework today. Postmodernism, what is the problem? Kindly specify, or you want to know the entire postmodernism? Because postmodern debate will come later also. Any specific doubt you have, kindly post it. You have any specific doubts? Postmodernism, okay, fine. Or B, any other doubts there are? So kindly write it in one go so that I can start talking about it. Or B doubts? So postmodernism is one, let us keep it.
Is feminist perspective an outcome of postmodernism?
Then, so postmodernism, feminist perspective, accountability versus control. Anything else?
Is it necessary to have Indian polity knowledge before starting with public administration, because they've just started with polity part GS classes?
No, it's not necessary to have polity knowledge, because that you'll get within the class itself. But yes, if you have it, it will definitely help you in understanding it in a more lucid manner, in a more simple manner, if you have at least basic knowledge of polity. Okay, you don't need technical knowledge of polity, because that you'll know within the class itself. So if you have it, good. If you don't have it, you'll learn it.
Sir, could you please explain a little bit more about gender budgeting and why government hasn't
Yeah, we'll talk about CC. That was just the decoding the syllabus. what are the various dimensions of the syllabus. So gender budgeting and everything will take up once we get into that particular unit. Right? So as of now, you can just understand that gender budgeting is one of the means of inclusive development. Fine, inclusive financial inclusion, especially of women. And as of now, the government's allocation ranges between 10% to 25% in the overall budget outlay with respect to different schemes, right? Not everywhere, with respect to some social development schemes. The variation is between 10 to 25%, which should be 33.3% at least. And over the time, the government aims it to increase it to 50%. For example, NREGA, 50% of the task would be allocated to women. That has become mandatory. Panchayati Raj institutions, in many states, 50% reservation for women. Right? So, government is trying to do it through this means. Right? So, as of now, those technicalities we can forego because we'll again do it once we get into that unit. Right? Any other doubts? So, shall I take up these? Right, so others are? Okay. Right. Now postmodernism, because there are a few new students also I know. So they might feel they go back and watch the videos. Okay. So it will be more easy for them. But postmodernism I'll explain again. Right. Now let us say this is a teacup or a coffee cup. Right? You agree? You agree with this? This is a cup, a teacup. Right? Is it visible to you? Right? But do you think I'm having tea in this? I'm having black coffee. Right. Now somebody tells you that this cup is to be used only for tea. Or if you have to have tea, you will use this cup. Who told you this? That's a very interesting discussion. Who told you? Me. मम्मी. हाँ सही है, मम्मी ने बोला. मम्मी को किसने बोला? उनकी मम्मी ने. Right, correct. So it was told to you by your parents, or you saw it happening in your family, right? This is how it is. Things are done. So I would say that it's okay. I don't want this cup, right? For me, if I take a glass and have tea, I would love that. Tea is better in a glass than in a cup. Or tea is better in that, what is that, cooler? Fine? The mud glasses, the potter's glass that are there. So tea is better in that than this one. Now this is what? These are three different views. Three different views about having tea. Right? So now go back and try to understand. The moment we define the knowledge, okay, the information in such a manner that there is only one cause, only one effect relationship. If this is so, it is this. If this is so, it is this. Fine? There is no scope of different viewpoints in understanding it. There is no scope of pluralism. There is no scope of diversity in understanding something. The moment this happens, that there is no scope, okay, of bringing diverse viewpoints, or diverse and alternative views are not acceptable because they are considered to be wrong or either false or something illogical. For example, alternative medicine. So allopathic medicine, okay, comes with some specific do's and don'ts, a specific understanding of human physiology, and that is what they have put it into a, let us say, a medical handbook. Right? And they are saying that no, anything which is beyond this is not a science. Anything which is beyond this is against the medical knowledge. Right? But what about homeopathy? What about Ayurveda? What about Sowa Rigpa? Okay, what about the traditional knowledge, the traditional wisdom? What about it? If it is so that there is only one-to-one knowledge, okay, or there is a definite, precise knowledge, then what about the alternative viewpoints? They will not exist, or they will be discarded. Now the idea of postmodernism is this, that the Western knowledge, a predefined knowledge, a constructed knowledge which has been given to us has to be questioned. Why it has to be questioned? Because there are multiple viewpoints, there are multiple perspectives to understand something, and all of them may be true simultaneously at the same time. Right? So if I say I will have tea in a cup, fine. If I say I'll have tea in a glass, that also is fine. Which is superior to what? There is no comparison. We don't do comparisons. We accept all the conclusions at the same time. That means there is nothing like absolute knowledge. There is nothing like a universal knowledge. There is nothing like bondage or burden, okay, which is coming from the Western world or Western notion of science. The Western notion of knowledge based on scientific understanding. So postmodernism is that perspective which says that pluralism is part of society. Multiple viewpoints are necessary to understand the domain and scope of something. If we discard multiple viewpoints, if we discard alternatives, okay, we are actually doing injustice to the knowledge. Whereas the Western concept of science is based on positivism, that we say, we'll talk about it. Positivism, it is basically based on the notion that this is the precise knowledge, this is the fact, and anything beyond this or anything against it is not a fact and should not be accepted as knowledge. So postmodernism comes with its own narratives. It discards the grand narratives, the universalism, that everything is same everywhere. Everything should be same everywhere. Everything should be the way defined by the Western traditional science. Right? I'll give you a simple example. When you talk about Newton, Newton is discarded by Einstein. Do you know about them? Right? Do you know about them or not? So Friday's class will always be interesting, right? Because we are not going to be purely bookish knowledge. Poverty is a very interesting subject which goes beyond the bookish knowledge. Right? Do you know about Newton, Einstein? Apart from what they are known for. Okay, Apple, gravity. Right? Now Newton was a supporter of classical physics. Newton gave certain laws of motion that we all know, and they were accepted to be universally true. Einstein comes, discards them, brings the idea of gravitational force, the gravitational potential energy, and he comes with the idea of relativity. सब कुछ relative है, कुछ भी absolute नहीं है. ठीक है? Are you understanding? So Newton ने उसको discard किया. Heisenberg, who also got the Nobel Prize but could not become very popular because he was challenging the Western notion of science. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Heisenberg was the student of Einstein. He challenged Einstein himself. Right? But Einstein's knowledge was supposed to be or it created a universal interest in the science fraternity and in fact glorified the Western notion of science. So Heisenberg could not get that fame, even though Heisenberg was one step ahead of Einstein. Then your Stephen Hawking comes. And likewise, so you understand, these are all what? Evolution of knowledge. So postmodernism is coming with that perspective only, that till now what have you been studying, what are you saying is traditional science, what you accept as the belief, the science becoming like a dogma. Science is not about dogmas, science is not about doctrines, science is about questioning things. So postmodernism comes with this framework, that we have to question the established. Right? We have to bring multiple viewpoints. All the viewpoints can exist at the same time and they all should be accepted as correct. There is no absolutism. There is diversity. All the diverse viewpoints, all the diverse aspects must be taken into account before we understand any phenomena in this world, before we profess any knowledge. Right? And this is what we are doing. Contingency model, circumstances. Situations are the determining factor of any occurrence, of any conclusion that we make in a particular situation. So see, any conclusion that you make is situational. आप हार्वर्ड से पढ़े होते तो शायद आप आईएएस नहीं दे रहे होते, बट आपके सर्कमस्टांस में आईएएस सीम्स टू बी द बेस्ट जॉब. Go and talk to a Harvard professor, Harvard University professor, or an MIT professor, right? Or a Stanford researcher. For them, it is nothing. So see, it is absolute in this frame, but not nothing in the other frame. And that is what postmodernism brings. So it discards hyper-reality, the grand truth. It discards the universal truth. It discards the grand narrative, and it talks about deconstructivism. Deconstructivism means that we have to, break one universal truth into multiple truths. We have to break it into various parts. We have to deconstruct the reality which has been imposed on us. This reality must be broken, must be shattered by visualizing the alternatives to this reality. The reality must not be taken as it is. It must be questioned. Jacques Derrida was a very famous deconstructivist scholar. Right? A simple example is, I say something, right? And if I say something that is more of opinion, not just universal fact, then the moment you listen to it, fine, all of you, like whatever 30, 40 people who are sitting, if you listen to that, right? So, you will interpret in one way, you will interpret in one way, you will interpret in one way. What does it mean? That there are 40 interpretations of what I am saying. And all the interpretations can be accepted at the same time that they are true. Because what interpretation I made, once I deliver it, now it is up to you what interpretation you make. And that is the kind of diversity of knowledge that postmodernism accepts. So if you write poetry, it is good. There is nothing like universally good poetry. Right? If you write a story, nothing like universally good story. Nothing like universally good. There is nothing like standard operating procedure for everything in the world. That is what postmodernism comes with. So it discards all this. And obviously it provides lot of new frameworks, conceptual frameworks to understand the public administration or any academic discipline. So let us talk about PubMed only. So in public administration, the dominance of traditional theories, the traditional scholars who view the organization in a particular way, who view power in a particular way, who view authority in a particular way, who view structure and hierarchy in a particular way, and they define principles on the basis of that. So postmodernism comes and starts questioning them that no, this is not power, this is not authority. Authority must be visualized in some other form also. Right? So, gender perspective, feminist perspective, subaltern perspective, the third world perspective, the developing countries perspective, the anti-development perspective, everything is a byproduct, or at least an initiation of postmodernism leads to the emergence of these developments. और कोई doubt है? So yes, feminist perspective is a consequence of post-behavioralism and postmodernism. Right now you just understand postmodernism. We'll come to post-behavioralism. What is that? और कोई डाउट है? नहीं है? ज़्यादा ज्ञान हो गया? ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं. ठीक है, ज्ञान ज़्यादा हो तो अच्छा है, कम नहीं होना चाहिए. ठीक है, एटलीस्ट हाफ बेक तो नहीं होना चाहिए. Accountability versus control. Obviously, when we are looking at accountability, we are referring to a sense of, you can say, a responsibility which is legal. You are accountable to certain things, to certain person, in a certain way. What is that way? Control. Control has two aspects. One is the coercive control, one is the persuasive control. One is the coercive control, the other is the persuasive control. Which one is better? You tell me. This will lead to This will lead to self-control. Right? View it in a larger perspective. Democracy किस पे काम करता है? इस पे काम करता है. Autocracy किस पे काम करता है? इस पे काम करता है. Superior subordinate relationship, traditional bureaucracy, traditional government system, इस पे काम करता है. Which is not suitable. So when we are saying control, so we have to understand that control is the means by which the accountability can be ensured. But what kind of control? This is better. Right? And this is probably not. This is what we are doing, but this is not acceptable. Right? So, obviously, it is quite logical that control is mechanism. Control is the means by which the accountability and responsibility can be ensured. But control has to be understood in the sense which promotes more of self-control, more of accountability in voluntary way, rather than in a coercive manner. हुआ कुछ क्लियर? ये ऑल क्लियर हो गया. Right? क्लियर है? क्लियर है? Then
everything is clear. Maybe it's a question.
what is subaltern perspective? Anything else? और कुछ है? Right, subaltern perspective. Let me give you a statement. ये आपने लिख लिया? How do you interpret this statement? It's a very famous statement. History is the graveyard of aristocracies. A famous statement. A history student knows them, knows this statement. Most of them. How do you interpret this statement? History is the graveyard of aristocracies. बताओ जरूर, ट्राई तो करो थोड़ा ट्राई करो. आप स्पून फीडिंग की आदत पड़ गई. Anybody? Right? Now see, how do we know history? Through the kings. How do we know history? Through the monarchs. How do we know history? Through the elites. Glorification of the king, good or bad, it doesn't matter. The leader, the monarch, the one person around whom the entire power is centralized. So in history, इसकी आंखों से देखते हैं, या इसके जो भी चमचे होंगे, लॉयलिस्ट होंगे, ठीक है, स्टूजेस होंगे, जो भी, whosoever, the people whom he would have patronized, we study history from them through their lens. But imagine, do you think that Alexander was great? He killed so many people, right? Do you think the people whose bravery we talk about in the history, what did they do? They killed people, they killed enemies, or they waged wars, they plundered many things. Now why? That is the glorification of violence, right? That is the glorification of inhumanity. But we all accept it to be a telltale. This is what the history is. History is known by brave men. Who are brave men? Who killed people? Fine. Who married 100 wives? 100 women? Okay, they had a harem of of women for them? They were the great men. Will today's morality accept it? Who were the great men? The great men would be those who suffered. The great men would be those who questioned them, but they were decimated from the dates of the history. They were decimated, they were eliminated from the scope of the historical knowledge that we acquire over the time. When we talk about the caste system in India, what do we talk about? We talk about the glorification of the Brahmins. We talk about exploitation, but initially, how do we think of the Indian society? Its traditional value system, its religion, religious rituals, cultural principles, whatever we talk about, we start about glorification of the higher castes. Right? So, you cannot say that this is the correct view of history. When you think of the Congress party formation in India, you view it from the perspective of the Hume, you view it from the perspective of the Gandhi. Not necessarily Gandhi was the only person, there were so many people who were part of it. If the history was to be rewritten from the Patel's viewpoint, right, or for that matter, as BJP says, from the Savarkar's viewpoint, then the Gandhi would have been a villain, not a hero. Right? So the Britishers, what they presented as our history, we accepted it. But that history was never written from the lens, from the eyes of those people who were exploited, from the common masses, the eyes of the common masses, how they saw what was happening in the society. So when you write the interpretation of society, when you present the history of society, its cultural evolution or its civilizational growth, from the perspective of the lowest strata, from the perspective of those who have been exploited, from the perspective of those who never had a voice in this history, that is known as the subaltern perspective. Right? That is the subaltern perspective, because that is presenting an alternative to the dominant viewpoint, and that is why it also becomes postmodernist. Postmodernism creates a scope for the doubts are over. Doubts are done, right? Okay. Fine. So see, paper 2. Paper 2 is a big problem because generally what happens, paper 2 content is very less, content is missing, people are not able to understand how to identify the content, then how to go for the current affairs of paper 2, right? If you see, it comprises of 14 units, right? And we will try to break these 14 units. Like we said, already certain units are clubbed with paper 1, right? So once you link it with paper 1, 3-4 units at least we study in paper 1 itself, right? So you will have to be very, you can say, conscious about it, that okay, when we are studying paper 1, how we are going to link the paper 2 with that, right? As far as paper 2 is concerned, the best reference for paper 2 is the second ARC, right? Now, second ARC has almost 14 reports. These 14 reports are broken into different topics, or you can say issues, right? So when you take paper 2, instead of going for the syllabus or going for the factual aspect of the syllabus, we must go for the issues of Indian administration. If we divide the entire paper 2 into different issues, taking your syllabus or unit as the indicative aspect for that issue. For example, if I talk about, let us say, unit 2, the philosophical and constitutional context of Indian administration, right? Let us say, I am trying to draw a table. Technically, how? We are going to visualize paper 2. Now see. Okay, we call this as issue-based approach, because a lot of issues are asked, and that is where the students are confused कि current affairs है. Current affairs तो है, but ये issues जो है, they are perennial in nature. They never die away. They never fade away. They are always there. And what is coming in the contemporary perspective has to be understood. Right? So virtually you can identify all the issues around which the questions will be asked. Fine. There will be the context we have to know. Okay, but the contemporary developments can be taken from the current affairs. Fine. So there is nothing like random questions which are asked. Okay, except one or two, like the question on net neutrality which was asked. Fine. And that is also not because that was a debate on privacy and the impact of social media, right? And net neutrality was one important issue, okay, which was going the rounds with respect to the IT Act that we have created, right? So that came into the question paper, right? Then questions related to disaster management, they are very contemporary, always asked. Okay, there is nothing like traditional disaster management question. It will always be contemporary disaster management question. Right? So there are so many areas, okay, which are generally asked. So if we say we have to focus on issues, right? Now issues, how do we identify the issues? Obviously issues are different from the facts, right? Let's say, for example, we take unit right? Unit 2, the philosophical or constitutional philosophy, but we are putting it this way, the philosophical and constitutional context of Indian administration, right? Now see, generally what should you study here? Can somebody tell us what should we study, right? We are obviously talking about the value premises. Right? The value premises of the Indian constitution or Indian political system. Right? Now when you say value premises, so shall we study directly the value premises? Yes, we should study part of value premises, no doubt. What are the value premises? Now you go and see the preamble. You interpret the fundamental rights. Fine, you understand various provisions. Okay, whether you talk about the reservation of seats in the parliament, or whether you talk about positive discrimination, okay, or whether you talk about DPSP. So you will understand, okay, minorities, you will understand that there is a vision, there is a value premise, okay, under which the entire this paraphernalia of the Indian political system has been established. Okay. So value premises, if you go to preamble. Now what most of the students do, they go and study the value premises of the Indian constitution or Indian political system. Fine. They don't go back and find out from where these value premises have come. Now, one can be the sources of the various sources from which the Indian constitution has been borrowed. We are borrowing the values also. It's not just the techniques and procedures. Then, right, we go to the historical, or we go back and find out or try to understand the historical perspectives, right? The impact of different rules, the impact of different rulers, okay, and the impact of different dynasties, monarchies, or the traditional Indian society evolving from the traditional, okay, Vedic period to, let's say, the British period. Now this can also help us in understanding the value premises, okay, prior to the making of Indian constitution and after the Indian constitution. So value premises, historical, source of the constitution, and the value premises may be related to the diversity. The socio-cultural diversity that we have, right? So if you now link this, go for a backward mapping, link this now. Instead of simply reading the preamble, right? Simply reading the preamble means what? Okay, that, kindly check the AC. It's been switched off. Okay. So the value premises, okay, if we just, the switch has, kindly see the switch. Fine. So the value premises, okay, will come from now the preamble. Okay, so when you read the preambles, so many students, what they do, just simply go and study the preamble and the values. Secularism एक वैल्यू है, justice वैल्यू है, sovereign, socialist, democratic, secular, justice, social, political, economic. ठीक है, हम क्या करते हैं, हम ये पढ़ते हैं, right? Now people don't go beyond this. This is the biggest drawback. Okay. Then they study number of judgments of court and all these things, and they try to write an answer which they feel is full of information and fact, but there is no analysis. Now when I say, okay, when you talk about secularism, when you talk about socialist democracy, then why don't you take this and identify the issues related to that? What are the issues? Okay, let us frame certain questions to know the issues. So if you have to create issues out of any information or fact that you're reading, you have to ask questions. What is secularism? Is Indian secularism unique? Or is India the only country in the world following secularism? If not, then which other countries also follow secularism? And how the Indian context or Indian secularism is different from the Western secularism? Now these are the issues, or this will give you further issues. See how logically we can build upon it. See. So let us say secularism you have written. Now you try to develop the next circle. You have to form concentric circles. Try to form the next circle. अब इसमें क्या आप क्वेश्चंस पूछो, फाइन? सो आपने एक क्वेश्चन पूछा, give answer to that question, or try to find answer to that question. Fine, you get some more issues out of this. And this exercise is not very tedious once you understand the logic. So secularism, why secularism? Is secularism in India unique? Is the nature of Indian secularism different? आपने यहाँ questions पूछे, fine? फिर हर question का, every question that you answer, or the every question for which you are looking for an answer, will again give you some more issues, right? Link it, and this becomes your actual scope from which the questions will be asked. So we'll do it over the time, right? And this is how we teach. This is what we do. So logically, but you can start this practice on your own also, even for your GS papers. And that's where the students falter. They believe that ये एक fact है, ये एक syllabus है, इसको ऐसे ही याद करना, ऐसे ही लिखना, right? So average marks, obviously. आपका आंसर average है, आपके marks भी average होंगे, right? But so you have to somewhere interpret. You have to go beyond the text which is given. So secularism हो गया, ठीक है, डिबेट हो गया, secularism, justice हो गया. Same way, you can develop the concentric circles, keep identifying its various issues, link these issues to what is happening in the contemporary society. For example, last 1 year current affairs. अब current affairs क्या है, आपको पता चल गया, most of the current happenings are around this issue, right? अब ये आपके लिए important हो गया. This becomes important for you for the exam, and that is how you identify the current affairs. Right? You can further link them. For example, how many of you know that there is and likewise the entire unit can be broken. So instead of taking unit by unit by unit, fine, we club a lot of units together, like for example 2, 3, 4. union government and administration, state government and administration, philosophical and constitutional context. Link them. So we understand the nature of questions that can be asked. Right? Planning, public sector undertakings. Right? Then, whether you talk about the district administration, office of district collector, local governance, planning, okay, urban governance, okay, urban institutions, okay, so we can club various units together, and then you'll see the syllabus is also quite repetitive in nature, right? So, let us say, this is how, okay, you have any doubts?
Students are saying something below. Indian secularism considers the qualms of various religions in the decision making, whereas Western secularism does not consider the religion.
That we'll talk about. See, it is just an example.
And the Indian secularism is unique as it regards all religions equally, but Western means complete separation from the religions.
So obviously, yeah, you're right. So the Indian religion and Indian secularism, Western secularism, there are various factors. You have to understand their socio-cultural history and our socio-cultural history. Fine, you simply cannot conclude based on that. Right? So when we talk about the notion of secularism in the Western countries, it is basically a product, a consequence of Renaissance and Reformation. Right? An acute criticism of the dominance of the religion in the political system. Right? And because of that, they had to face a lot of exploitation. Because of that, they were excluded from the various functions of the state. So, you have to understand that in India, nothing like this happened. In India, okay, we were a secular society. Right? But when you go back and when you talk about the wars, when you talk about the rigidity that existed in the medieval times, okay, when you talk about the dominance of practices, okay, even there was a difference between North India and South India. How did it emerge? The original habitants, the Dasyus, and so-called the Central Asians entering into India, right? So you have to understand the specific history, and then only you can talk about, yeah. And in terms of the manifestations, you can say yes. Church is still very dominant there. If you don't know, right? They are still very religious. Conservative societies हैं. George Bush won the second term on the issue of abortion, right? So आप ये नहीं बोल सकते कि religion वहाँ dominant नहीं है, बिल्कुल है, right? But we have to understand that is a different aspect. We'll talk about it over the time. Don't worry. So when you talk about paper 2, so most important thing is first to identify the issues. How we do it, I've just given you an example. And then once we are able to identify, break this entire syllabus into number of issues, into micro issues, their dimensions, and now we can link one issue with another. Okay. Yes, let us say, for example, you are talking about preterism. Now, one of the aspects, key features of the Indian Constitution, not mentioned, but it is there, right? Preterism. Then you talk about, we have a notion of decentralized governance, Panchayati Raj institutions. We have to organize the local governments. In which article have we given it? In which article do we talk about it? The decentralized notion of governance. In which article do we talk about it? So, when we talk about this, let us say Article 40, coming from the Gandhian philosophy, we mostly attribute Article 40 or the Panchayati Raj institutions and their conception, okay, primarily based on the Gandhian philosophy. Okay, what is the Gandhian philosophy that talks about the Panchayati Raj? Like you have Article 40, Organization of Village Panchayat. What is that philosophy of Gandhi? Okay, which helps us review the role of the Gram Sabha, the Panchayati Raj institutions in the context of governance in India. What is the philosophy of Gandhi? Right? Nobody. The concept of Swaraj. Antodaya, Sarvodaya. All have joined? Fine? It's okay. Right? So, Swaraj and Suraj, Antodaya and Sarvodaya. Right? So, can somebody tell me what does Swaraj and Suraj, the difference between them?
Decentralization, public reform approach. It was before this question.
Okay. Now, once this question is being asked, now can you tell me that how the conception of Swaraj and Suraj differ and how they are same? Antodaya and Sarvodaya. Right? So, when you talk about decentralized governance, you have to understand the core philosophical aspect, and then you have to link the problems and issues of this particular topic. That is the first. Swaraj is about self-rule. The concept of village, self-republic. The autonomy of the villages. Villages being independent political entities which can govern themselves. Suraj is about good governance. Swa, self. Su is good. Right? So self-governance and good governance, both, can be achieved by the idea. Sarvodaya. What does Sarvodaya mean? सब पे दया नहीं, that is not the idea. Sarvodaya is the Sarv plus Udaya. That is the rise of all, the growth of all. The rise of all, the growth of all. Now that is the idea of Sarv, Uday or Sarvodaya. So Gandhian notion of the Sarvodaya, right, is essential to the understanding of the village self-republic concept or the Panchayati Raj institution. But is it only Gandhi? No. Now you have to review the Ambedkar's social justice concept also when you think of Panchayati Raj institution. Now see, this is where the analysis comes. So you know about Panchayati Raj, let's say. So we are talking about the decentralized governance. Now there are 2-3 units. In fact, 2 units you can say. One on the rural development, one on the urban development. Urban governance, rural governance, Panchayati Raj institutions. So these 2 units are now, they can be understood here. The basic concepts can be understood here with this topic itself when we are studying unit 2. Fine. When we are studying planning, I think unit 5 or 4. So when we are studying planning, decentralized planning, okay, we can include the Panchayati Raj and urban governance, both there. Right? When we are studying in paper 1, when we are studying development administration, and we think of development or the changing profile of development administration, how the concept of development itself is changing. So now we are moving toward the bottom-up approach, which is more desirable. Now, in the Development Administration Paper 1, CPA-DA that we talked about, there also we can link this entire topic. See? So people say, link kaise karna hai? Link kaise karna hai? This is what linkage is. Once you break the syllabus, develop micro topics and issues, and then link those micro issues together, you have linked the syllabus. You have linked the answers. You have interlinked paper 1 with paper 2. Nothing else is to be done. That will be very natural and organic linkage. Otherwise, everything else is a forced linkage. Jabasti ek scholar ka naam aapne use kar liya. Fine, that scholar is not relevant maybe to the Indian context. Maybe possible. Right. So, if we go this and then Antodaya. Antodaya, the inclusion of the last man. The weakest of the weak. The poorest of the poor. The last man standing in the queue is the Antodaya, the Uday of the last. The growth or the rise of the last man. Right? So, unless you understand this logic, you cannot understand Panchayati Raj institution. But you cannot just understand Panchayati Raj institution from the perspective of Gandhian philosophy. You have to go back and review the Ambedkar's concept of social justice also. Ambedkar's view of social justice. What is Ambedkar's conception of social justice? If you have read his book or if you have heard about the book Annihilation of Caste, it's a tremendous book. It's a very important book for sociology students or even for understanding Indian society to an extent. The Annihilation of Caste. Have you heard about it? What is the concept of Ambedkar's social justice? Now Ambedkar, while talking about Article 17, Article 17 of the Constitution, like I told you, you don't have to mug up. Fine, we'll know about it, everything. You'll remember all the articles if you are able to link it to the various concepts that you're studying. If you simply start mugging up the article, impossible. Right? Yesterday, we talked about the borrowing powers of the state. Do you remember? Which article was that? And anybody? Who gave this answer? Arjun. Good. Fine. Okay. So you remember, that's better. Now see Article 17, when Ambedkar was trying to include Article 17. Fine. When you read the constitutional debates, you'll understand. Fine. So Sapru the, Nehru the, Ambedkar the. Fine. There were Rajendra Prasad the. So they were basically, okay. And there were so many other members also. Right. So they were debating about this Article 17, or for that matter, Article 18, right? Or for that matter, Article 19(2) or Article 30. Now many of you will now try to ask me, ये justice से related कैसे है? Fine. Social justice concepts से related कैसे? पंचायती राज institutions से related कैसे है? Fine. And that is the beauty of learning beyond the book. Right? Your one line can add 3 marks to your answer. I've seen students. Just a little qualitative development and they've scored 400 plus. Okay, at least 470, 460, 450, 434 in Gs. You cannot. It's not that you cannot. The logic is you don't have to alter drastically. You have to just improvise a little bit. Article 17 talks about abolition of untouchability. 18 talks about abolition of titles. 19(2) talks about, shall I write it? Otherwise you might. Abolition of untouchability. Abolition of titles. reasonable restrictions on fundamental freedoms, right to constitutional remedies, 32. Right. Now, when you review these articles, see, this is directly in tune with the social justice. Now, imagine, second ARC has given a line. Imagine that we are decentralizing. Fine? We are giving autonomy at the local level. We are giving powers to the Gram Sabha. And we are believing that Gram Sabha is the pillar, is the epitome of direct democracy in this country. And Gram Sabha is going to alter the power structure that exists in this society, because people will be empowered at the grassroots level. Their political participation will increase. They will have control and ownership of their own resources. So decentralized governance will lead to all these benefits. Fine? And that is true, no doubt. But imagine that the Indian society, as per Ambedkar's logic, see, Indian society is a caste-ridden society, is an exploitative society based on socio-cultural stratification. It is a stratification system which is cultural stratification system. You know what is that stratification system called? The caste system. What kind of stratification it is? Every society has some form of stratification. Every society has some hierarchy. Every society will have some divisions. Fine? Higher, lower, in some form. But this is very unique. It is a cultural stratification. Cultural stratification means that it is carried from generation to generation and technically never ends. So it is a closed stratification system where you cannot come out of this loop of cultural status or cultural identity that you acquire from your family, from birth. Right? Now see. So do you agree that when we talk about Gram Sabha, and when you talk about, let us say, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1992-93, right? So, what are the articles related to the Panchayati Raj institution? Okay, this will be a very appropriate example for you to understand how we have to link various parts of the syllabus together. And then we have to visualize it comprehensively. And that is how the answer will be written. And that is how the content will come in the answer. Otherwise, there will be a lack of content always. What are the articles related to without Googling? 243. Right. 243 to 243O. 243 to 243O. 243P to 243Z or ZG. Right? This is for urban. This is for rural. 11th schedule, 10th schedule. 11th schedule consists of the powers, the functions of the local government, rural local governments. All the functions that can be delegated, there are around 29 functions. Right? So, when we talk about this, right, or Gram Sabha, this, we imagine, we believe that people will be a part of that. there will be a political inclusion, there will be a social inclusion, there will be an economic mobilization, empowerment of these people. But in reality, this is not true. So second ARC writes a line. It says that it is not necessary that decentralization will lead to democratization. Do you agree? Do you agree with this? Decentralization will lead to democratization. It is not necessary that this is going to happen. Why? Because there are social factions, there are social crevices, there are social barriers and cultural barriers which exist at the lowest level, at the Gram Sabha level. We see the caste hierarchy is still prevalent and the exploitation is still there. So even if you provide the reservation to SC, ST and even OBCs over the time, fine, and women, 33, 1 by 3% or 50%, fine, okay, still their social status will not change. Most of the Gram Sabha meetings, you will see that the so-called higher castes, so-called the local elites, the local power structure which exists there, so-called the local elites would be sitting on the chairs, would be sitting on the chowkis or khatiyas and whatever, and the others from so-called lower caste or women would be sitting somewhere on the ground. Now this kind of decentralization, can it create equality? It cannot create equality. So now once you understand the Ambedkar's concept of social justice, abolition of this, putting this into the fundamental right, his logic was that if you want to create a democracy, if you want to create political democracy, a functioning political system which is democracy, you need to first create a social democracy. You need to create a social democracy which will become the base of the economic and political democracy. This is the idea of Ambedkar now. Right? So here we have to have a social democracy. Then only we can think of political or economic. So the base at the base of the economic or political democracy lies the social democracy. Now you can appreciate or critically evaluate the role of Panchayati Raj institutions. Unless you do this, you cannot understand it. Right? The people who are giving references to the traditional Hindu society, to the traditional Indian society, okay, obviously going back to the Vedic civilization or Vedic period, and then they are saying that we had the concept of Panchayat, Panchjanya, and all those in that era. They have to understand, but it was mostly dominated by the elites. It was Panchayat, it was not democratic decentralization. It was Panchayat. It was an administrative system, Panchayat. Sabhas, Samiti, dominated by who? The culturally rich, the culturally elites, the educated people. Right? So you cannot simply equate this to this. This is not same. Right? When you talk about the British period, when you talk about the Mughal administration, the Mughals were mostly an urban administration. They left the villages, okay, to remain isolated from the rest of the administration. There were various reasons for that. The Mughal administration was a paper administration. It was a highly bureaucratic system, Kagzi Raj, it is called. Right? It was a military administration. The village life was dreaded by the Mughal officers. They wanted a life of luxury. They wanted a life of comfort and entertainment. And that's why they despised the village life. And in consequence, the villages were left more or less isolated. It was not that they never wanted to intervene, but the logic was, okay, by default, they never intervened in the village life, and more or less the village chemistry, fine? The village cultural, the symbiotic relationship that existed, okay, that existed. But when the Britishers come, they understand, they realize that we need to intrude into this peace, into this harmony, because unless we disturb this, we are not going to disturb the social structure of this country. We are not going to control the social structure unless we disturb this harmony. So sociological concept, if you have heard of the kind of barter system that existed. What is the name for such barter system which existed at the village level? Have you heard of this? Nobody? Winnie? Jajmani system. So Jajmani system was a kind of barter system existent at the village level, and irrespective of the caste, creed, religion, it operated very peacefully. It operated in a balanced manner. So the farmer used to produce, the priest used to preach or teach or perform rituals. So the farmer used to give a part of the grain to the priest. Okay. The priest would perform his duty. Barber in the same manner. Right? Halwai in the same manner. You can think of that way. A merchant in the same manner. So there was a kind of, you can say, an existence, an independent existence, and most of the needs were being fulfilled at the village level. Right? But imagine that the outsiders intrude now. They create a zamindari system, or they promote a particular type of zamindari system. Right? They create a collector's office, then they put Lekhpal into that, an official they create, right? Patwari they create, and likewise, so they create the officials who are now intruding into these matters. So you have to appreciate that also. Okay, Rippon's contribution, you have to understand that also. Right? Mayo's resolution, that also you have to understand. Okay, prior to that Chaukidari Act, the Chaukidari law that comes. Fine, and likewise, fine. So you will find that unless you link all this, you cannot understand the essence of Panchayati Raj institution or decentralized governance. Right? This was just an example how we are going to deal with every topic which is there. Right? Its context, its history, its socio-cultural perspective, its current dynamics, everything will be linked. Right? And for this, obviously, we need references. Right? So, when you think of this, right? So 1718 abolition of title was specifically promoted by him because he knew that this was one reason which created the disparity at the social level. Okay, even at the villages. Anywhere throughout the Indian society. Right. Then Article 19.2, reasonable restrictions. Why restrictions? Because imagine that you have provided freedoms. Who will enjoy the freedoms? Who will enjoy the freedom? Who's benefiting from this entire lockdown, from this digital revolution? Are we benefiting? No. Are you benefiting? No. Who's benefiting? Jio is benefiting. Okay. Airtel is benefiting. Facebook is benefiting. WhatsApp is benefiting. They are benefiting. YouTube is benefiting. We are merely just one of the means, nothing else. They are the giants. Netflix is benefiting. Amazon is benefiting. Yes. So see, whenever the freedom would be given, whenever the fundamental rights would be bestowed, they are being bestowed to everyone equally. But when everyone is not equal in the society, the ones who are at a privileged position will benefit better than the others. They will have more means, they will have more modes of exercising their freedom than the others. And that is why there is a need for restriction. Equality comes with a rider, notwithstanding anything above. Special provisions can be made for women, children and socially and educationally backwards. Article 16, Article 15, you will see everywhere the concept of social justice is visible. So simply talking about decentralization and creating Panchayati Raj institutions and local governance will yield this result is not to be understood as it is. And then there are obviously administrative relationships and functions between them. So when you think of this, for example, a topic which I just, constitutional remedies, obviously this right was given. Right? Can you restrict the Article 32 in any way? Somebody told me they are reading polity now. Article 32 is what? That you can go to the court to enforce your fundamental rights, and it is justiciable. Justiciable, that means you can directly go to the court for the enforcement of fundamental rights. Which court? The High Court and the Supreme Court. High Court under Article 226 and Supreme Court under Article 32. This treats everyone equally in terms of justice delivery, in terms of accessing the judicial system for protection of their individual fundamental rights. It obviously was needed in the context of Indian society. There should not have been any ifs and buts, parallel powers given to High Court and Supreme Court. In fact, people say High Court enjoys more power. No, it is not true. High Court enjoys more means of enforcing it. Right? So, these provisions. So, you have to go for the essence of the Constitution to understand that topic. Fine? So, it's facts, historical context, right? It's different nuances, it's different dimensions that have to be understood. Then it's structure, the basic facts related to them. Then it's contemporary dynamics, the contemporary debates. Now today what is happening? People are talking about something neo-localism. अब ये एक टॉपिक दिया हुआ है आपके पंचायती राज लोकल गवर्नेंस में. Right? Constitutional philosophy talks about decentralization. Neo-localism कहाँ है वहाँ पे? So there is a topic in your syllabus known as neo-localism. So neo-localism, now understand the word localism. The philosophy of being local, the philosophy of promoting local, the philosophy of decentralization or going to the grassroots, localism. Now, neo-localism is a debate, and the debate includes many things, like when we talk about global versus when we talk about localism, when we talk about global village, right? Now there are several ideas, right, which are doing rounds under the context of now this is the topic in your paper 2, Panchayati Raj institutions. Now when you are thinking of neo-localism as an idea, you have to think of globalization first of all. Secondly, you have to think that what is the context in which I am studying it? It's globalization. Second, what is the immediate scope in which I am reading it? It's the local government. Local government. So what exactly would it mean in terms of local government? So this you can link to your paper 1, unit 1, globalization. Development administration. Comparative public administration. You are basically what? Comparing the impact of globalization on Western countries, the impact of globalization on non-Western countries. Now see, there are multiple threads which are running. Somewhere you have to weave them together, right? And you can weave them together only when you conceptually are able to link them. Otherwise, रायता फैलेगा लेकिन उसको क्लीन नहीं कर पाओगे. Right? So, globalization के context में हमें समझना है localism, neo-localism. Now see, a simple debate which says that we want decentralization. Fine? What is the political philosophy which supports decentralization? What is the principle, political theory, the political science philosophy, the political science principle or the democratic principle which supports the decentralization? What is that principle called? Known as the principle of subsidiarity. And it is one of the essential principles of federalism. Yesterday we had a little discussion on that. Do you agree that federalism would survive, would exist, would grow only when there is a less tendency of centralization, there is a little tendency of, the unitary or the excessive control of the central government over the federal units. Once this tendency is reduced, the federalism will survive. ये आपको समझ में आया? So principle of subsidiarity बोलता है that federalism is an idea. Fine. A democracy as a system can only survive, can only grow, can only become stable when we reduce the tendency of centralization and we promote the tendency of decentralization. That is subsidiarity. Most of the important functions, most of the authority, most of the power should be exercised at the lowest level. And the central government and the federal governments must perform, or regional governments must perform as minimum functions as possible, so that to promote the trust amongst the local governments, to give them a major role, a major stake in the developmental process, because development cannot take place unless it is done at the local level. Are you understanding this one? So principle of subsidiarity is the main principle or main theoretical ground which supports decentralization. And it believes that the more we decentralize, the more stable federal system we will become. So you can say it is the bedrock principle of federalism. Right. So let us say that it talks about decentralization. Decentralization being the bedrock principle of federalism. And obviously local governments, when we talk about in India or elsewhere, local governments are based on the conception that the local or the grassroots is to be strengthened so that the entire political system can be strengthened. Right? Small is beautiful, that is the idea. Right. So let us say, or local is beautiful. So let us say we believe in this and we decentralize. When we are decentralizing, we are giving autonomy to the local governments. Fine? And there is probably demand for more autonomy over the time. When you say you are making the local governments absolutely autonomous of the other governments, the state government or the regional government does not have much control over local governments. Local governments are sufficient, self-sufficient, they can do things right. Regional government performing its own function, central government performing its own function, and probably there is no conflict. Now this is the initial idea. Now what happens? Let's say terrorism, Naxalism, point, disasters, communal riots, social conflicts. Now will the local governments be capable of resolving all these problems? Consumerism, materialism, encroachment by the private players, dominance of the multinational corporates, crony capitalism, there can be many things, a number of things which will be affecting a nation state, consequently the local government. Because it has been made autonomous and independent, the assumption is that it can solve its own problem. But think of the type of problem, the nature of problem that we are encountering. Think of the complexities of the problems that we are encountering. Okay, will it be possible for the local government to handle it? No. So what will local government do? It will look up to the regional government. कि भाई थोड़ा सा सपोर्ट दे दो. वो बोलेगा क्यों दे दो? You are constitutionally independent. You are autonomous. Right? We don't have any barter. We don't have anything to share. Okay, you are being given independent powers to act on your own behalf. Right? I can only support you from outside, nothing else. It will go to the central government. Give us the central government say already we have a lot of problems. Right? You kindly handle your own issues. Now what does it mean? That autonomy may not be synonymous to independence, may not be synonymous to self-sufficient or self-sufficiency. Unless and until the capability is developed of the local governments, unless the capability enhancement is done, they are not at all capable of dealing with these kind of complex problems. So you can say post 2001 onwards, or 2004 you can say onwards, a new debate started that local government or local autonomy does not mean the isolation of local government. It means reintegration into the entire governance process. They must get support from the regional and the national governments, or even at the cost of sacrificing some of their independent powers. Okay, they should be benefited, mutually supported by them. Okay, this is now numerous case studies are available in the Indian Institute of Public Administration journal or in the Yojana that you read, right? Or for that matter, status of forest report, which basically talks about Forest Rights Act and PESA, right? Or MOEF reports come, right? Or PRIA, Participatory Research in Asia, is an NGO, is a global NGO which is working mostly for the understanding of the decentralization and local governments in the Southeast Asian countries. Now there are a lot of case studies. Use these case studies to substantiate your argument. So the essential aspect of paper 2 is what? Case studies, facts, analysis, and obviously how dynamically you are able to link one topic to another. This is the biggest drawback the students have. They simply want to have a book. They want to read that book and they say, sir, मैंने जो है constitutional philosophy पढ़ लिया, यही तो आएगा. Union government पढ़ लिया, sir, governor पढ़ लिया, president पढ़ लिया. This is not a polity paper. This is an administration paper, where administration means what? Decision making. Understanding the various nuances and the dimensions of a particular topic, a particular issue with respect to the administration or with respect to how it is to be tackled. Simply knowing the facts and knowing some information, 120, 110, 130 marks, and then I wrote everything. How can you write everything when you've never thought of everything together? Illogical. Right? So you don't have to fear that. It's very simple. Over the time, we'll develop the logic and the process in such a manner that you don't have to mug up second ARC, you don't have to mug up first ARC. There's need for reading a lot of reports in paper 2, Law Commission report, Pay Commission report, first ARC, second ARC, Santhanam Committee report, then your various administrative reforms committee reports, then you have international reports, some international reports. Okay, those all you have to, you have to imbibe into your answers so that you can write. Now, your GS paper 2 is going to be extraordinary if you use this approach. They ask similar kind of questions. Okay, e-governance, civil services, transparency, probity, problems in design and implementation of policies. From here, you are getting the actual fodder for your paper 2 GS also. Right? So this is one way of thinking how to go about paper 2. Right? Obviously, we have certain areas which I will decipher over the time. Monday को करेंगे, ठीक है? आज थोड़ा breaks हो गए. It's okay, but in your panel you will get the entire class. It will be synced together. Right? I am giving you a homework for these 2 days. I thought of taking class tomorrow also, but we have another class going on. Right? Puppet test series, so we have discussions for that. If you have students also, your known friends, you can send them to Prodigy. Okay, you can spread the word. Right. So, this is a homework, 2 questions for you. Kindly think about it. Don't try to write the perfect answer, there is no need. You just think about it, write points. Right? Don't try to make it a perfect answer like you have been doing. Okay, that is not required. You can kindly write points, but I want you to write pros and cons both. Positives and negatives both for this. Okay. This is a homework. It looks like back to the school. बट ये होमवर्क ऐसा है कि इसके लिए आपको डांट नहीं पड़ेगी, लेकिन आप खुद मोटिवेटेड होने चाहिए. क्वेश्चन नंबर 1. Do you agree that the scope of public administration is defined in terms of the Why? Do you agree that the scope of public administration is defined in terms of the scope of the society in which it is functioning? 200 words, 20 marks. Marks are immaterial, but just to relate it to your number of words. Fine. Then, fine. I think this is visible. So, discuss the concept of development. Do you think that growth and development are discuss the concept of development. Do you think that growth and development are mutually exclusive? Right? But I want you to write in points. Don't write in big paragraphs. That is not needed. Right? If possible, write in terms of pros and cons. Right? So whatever you are saying or supporting, in case you feel that it can be criticized also, put that also into the answer. So kindly do it. By Sunday you can send it. Fine? Or you can keep it with yourself also and you can send it on Monday. We can discuss 10 or 15 minutes before we start the class what points you have raised. Right? And then see you on Monday. Thank you so much for your patience, cooperation. All the best to you. Fine? And do spread the word. We are working hard for you. Thank you so much. See you then. Any doubts you have? In what sense? I'm not clear with your question. Growth and development from the economic perspective. Yeah, you can write, but if you give it more wider perspective, it would be good. We have discussed so many things over the time in the classes, obviously as an introduction. So you can bring those aspects also. What does development mean in the context of India? Okay, why growth would be, or why growth is necessary, or why growth, a particular type of growth will hinder the development, whether the growth is an input to development, or growth is an independent, it has an independent existence apart from the development. Can development be possible without growth? Is growth possible without development? Kindly look into these aspects. Any other doubt? Yes, obviously give example. Without example, what is the utility of writing the answer? Give the example from the contemporary society, from the Indian society. Pick up the issues, the problems which are there in our society. Any other doubts? So number of students are new, I know. So you have time now, 2 days, kindly see the videos. You need not attempt the question. If you want, you can attempt the question. If you feel like. Fine. You have any doubts? You can always. I think some of you are not on the Telegram. Be on the Telegram if possible, because a lot of activities are going on in the Telegram group. Fine. So you can just ping me or Ramon sir, anybody, and you'll be added to the Telegram. There, okay, a lot of questions, answers, debates going on. A lot of students are there who are selected also. Okay, so kindly take their benefit also. Fine. So I'm just a message away. You can always message me if you have any issue. Right? And I'll answer you in 24 hours. Thank you so much for your time. Take care. All the best. See you on Monday, 10 o'clock. 10. What is the time we have? See you then.